Hey everybody, Ryan Grant here and welcome back to the YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm basically going to be going over with you guys how to increase your appetite, right? For bulking and for skinny men trying to bulk up. And the reason I'm making this video is because I came across so many posts in a forum, so many people that are struggling to bulk because they don't have an appetite, right? And obviously, as we know, an appetite is the most important thing for being able to consume a certain amount of food. And in this case, if you're trying to bulk, if you're trying to gain weight, if you're trying to gain muscle, we obviously know you've got to eat in a calorie surplus. So having a big appetite at the right times throughout the day is extremely important. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over sorry if I can get my fingers right, 6 things that you can be doing that is going to be, we're basically going to be able to control when you have an appetite, right? And we're going to be starting to, these things are just very powerful, long story short, all right? So without further ado, I don't want to bore you guys with the intro, so let's get into today's video. So the first thing I want to go over with you guys is starting slow and progressively overloading with your diet. This is super important and something that people don't talk about. And in other words, if you're not too sure what this means, it basically just means training your body to eat more food. And I'll give you guys a really good example of how I do this, right? So at the start of my previous bulk, I'm not necessarily bulking anymore. I actually stopped that a few weeks ago. But at the start in October 2024, when I started on the first day, I started with my breakfast being 4 eggs and 2 bits of toast. Just start because I've just come off a cutting phase, therefore my appetite isn't very high and I'm not able to stomach that much food at that point. So I started off relatively light, right? And the more consistent I got with this, the easier I was able to stomach this food. So let's say after a few days of eating this food, I slowly upped it to 5 eggs and 2 bits of toast and some cheese in the meal. And then yet again, the same thing, a few days or a week after, I upped it to 6 eggs and then 2 bagels now and then salmon as well and an avocado, right? So you just got to slowly train your body to be able to eat more food. I hear so many people saying that they're sick of eating food and they try and shove so much food down them to the point where it makes them feel sick and it puts them off food. This is because you don't build it up. You don't start slow and progressively overload the amount of food you eat over time, right? And to put it into a really good example, it's like a beginner in soccer or football trying to play on a professional pitch, even though they haven't played before, right? They've got to practice. They've got to build up their skills, their abilities to eventually be to eventually have the capabilities to be chosen to play on a professional pitch, right? And I know that's a bit of an out there example in relation to this, but you don't. But the main message I'm trying to explain through this example is it won't happen straight away. You won't be able to eat this amount of food straight away, right? Great things don't come to you straight away. You've got to be able to train yourself up to be able to have the capabilities to do these things, right? So you've got to start slow. You've got to start eating a little less than you think. And I want to ask you guys a quick question. Why on earth would you try and eat in a calorie surplus if you can't even eat consistently at maintenance calories or even in a slight deficit yet? It doesn't make any sense. So you've just got to slowly build it up, and your ability to withstand more food and stomach more food over time will increase. So that's tip number 1 for increasing your appetite. You want to start slow and progressively overload. Now moving on to the second tip, which is hydration. Okay, keeping yourself hydrated is super important, not just for the simple health benefits of, H2O, flushing out waste products when you're, post workout, all of that stuff, right? But hydration and drinking water and making sure you're drinking enough is super important because it actually helps expand your stomach, right? When you gulp down like a pint of water, for example, you feel like your belly's just expanded, right? And this is exactly the benefit towards increasing your appetite. The more you do this, the more obviously your stomach has got to hold this water for a temporary amount of time, right? I don't necessarily know the details of how it enters the stomach, etc., etc., but you get my point. It has to hold this water. So if you keep yourself hydrated over a prolonged period of time, it's inevitably going to expand because it's got to hold more water. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to get fat by any means. You're not going to get fat at all, and you won't get a belly, but that's not how it works. But you'll just be able to stomach more food because your stomach has expanded as a consequence of keeping hydrated. Just make sure you keep yourself hydrated. That is going to train your stomach to, expand. Therefore, when it comes around to eating food, when you don't necessarily have water in your system, your stomach is going to be expanded so you can stomach more food. Therefore, you're able to eat more food easily before you feel full, right? So that's tip number 2, okay? Now moving on to tip number 3, okay? Tip number 3 is eating at the same times every day or similar times every day. If you're a watcher of this channel, you know exactly what I mean, but for the new guys around here, eating at the same time every day is super, super important for increasing your appetite because it actually helps us work with our body, right? It actually helps us use our body's biomechanics to our advantage, right? And this is basically because us as humans, we have a hormone called our ghrelin hormone. And if you don't know what this is, it's basically the hormone that basically tells our brain to tell our body and tell us when we should be hungry, right? So when this ghrelin hormone tells our brain to send this message, we start to feel hungry, and that is how our appetite starts to spike, right? And what happens a lot of the time when people have inconsistent eating patterns, when they eat snacks at random times, I'm going to go into that a little later as tip number 6, when they just don't have a meal structure, when they don't have a meal plan. For example, they eat breakfast one day at 7 a.m. and then 11 a.m. the next day and then 1 p.m. the next day because they wake up really late. When they don't have this consistent time, you're not helping your ghrelin hormone know when the right time is to stimulate the appetite so you're able to stomach all of this food, right? So making sure you eat at the same times every day is super, super important. So for example, just creating a routine around your day. So if you work a 9 to 5, you may want to eat breakfast at 7 a.m. before you go. And then you may want to prep a lunch for your lunch break at 12. And then 5 p.m. if you go to the gym after work, you may want to pack a pre-workout meal. And then when you get home, you may want to have dinner and then a protein shake. I don't know. That's just something to think about, right? So making sure you're eating at the same times every day is so important for increasing your appetite, and your body's just going to start to recognize these patterns, right? And it's literally the same thing with working out, right? And just optimizing everything you do, from your sleep, your bedtime routine, meditation, study, right? Gym, right? If you start to do these things at the same time every day, your body's really clever. It's going to start to recognize when you do these activities. So it's inevitably just going to self-prime the body. So, when you do meditation every day, you're going to start to feel in a meditative state, right? When you go to the gym at the same time every day, for example, if you go to the gym at 1 p.m. every day, at 12 or 12:30, your body's just going to start to get in the mood. You're just going to start to feel strong naturally on most of the days anyway. When you eat at the same time every day, you're going to start to feel hungry. If you eat lunch at 1 p.m, you're going to start to feel hungry at 12:30, for example. When you go to sleep at the same time every day, we got your circadian rhythm, which is the body clock, right? If you go to sleep at 9:30 at the same time every day, your body's going to start to naturally prime itself an hour to 2 hours before that to get sleepy and to get into a restorative state, right? So actually doing a lot of things at the same time every day, it may sound robotic, but it's the most optimal way to do things because that's how you work with your body and that's how you team up with your body. And it's the same thing with increasing your appetite, right? When you eat at the same times every day, your body's going to start to recognize when, so it's going to basically just do you a favor and start to feel hungry when you need to eat. Therefore, it's going to be easier to eat. Therefore, the likelihood of you eating in a surplus is higher. Therefore, you're going to gain weight and gain muscle, and everything's going to become a whole lot easier for you. Now moving on to point 4 out of 6. So having a wide variety palette, right? Having a wide variety palette, aka making sure you have a wide variety of foods you eat, is super, super important, especially as a beginner trying to eat a lot of food. What happens is, there's a common stigma around protein shakes, chicken, rice, and all of this stuff. Yes, they are really good for you. However, if you just limit your palate to those foods, then you're going to eventually get bored of them. You're not necessarily going to enjoy them. And this actually happened on my last bulk, and I learned from this lesson, and I started to change my palate, which actually really helped. And what basically happened with me was I just got so bored of these foods that I was so hungry, but I didn't want to eat those foods, which is really, really unhealthy. So you just want to make sure you're eating foods that you enjoy. And that's the most important thing about it. You actually eat foods that you enjoy. Because if you don't enjoy it, literally as I just said, right, I got bored of the foods I was having, and it got to a point where I was hungry, but I didn't want to eat, which is really unhealthy. You don't want to get to that point, right? You want to eat foods that you enjoy, because that is ultimately the thing that is going to keep you consistent, which is the most important thing for eating in a calorie surplus. Okay, so if you get bored of eating scrambled eggs on toast, you may want to switch it up to fried eggs, or a different variant of eggs, or a completely different source of protein, right? Or just, switch it out for a Greek yogurt breakfast or something. I don't know. It's just so important, right? Making sure you actually enjoy what you're eating and just enjoying what you're doing, right? Just think about it like this. Why would you pursue something that's hard, difficult, painful, such as a business that you don't enjoy or don't have a passion for, right? If you're a space engineer and you quit your job and you start a business about I don't know, in the real estate niche, and you don't necessarily have a passion for that, then and you just have a passion for space engineering, then the likelihood of you not making it far is quite high, because you're not going to necessarily have the will to do the work even when it gets hard, right? So making sure you enjoy this stuff is super, super important, especially if you're eating in a calorie surplus and maintaining your high appetite and will to eat. Okay, now moving on to the penultimate point of this video, number 5 of 6. Sorry, I'm just going to double check I'm filming. Yep, I am, because sometimes I do this and I don't film the videos, or if the camera's the wrong way and have to refilm, and it's absolute hell, right? So number 5, the penultimate point of this video, actually links to number 3. So this point links to the point of eating at the same times every day, right? Actually, number 6 does as well. So number 5 is don't drink lots before your meal. And you may be thinking right now, Ryan, isn't that point very paradoxical to the point to number 2, where you said you got to keep hydrated? Yes, obviously it is the complete opposite. However, you've got to be tactical about the times you keep yourself hydrated at, right? You don't necessarily want to gulp like 2 pints of water before you eat a big meal, because obviously then you're going to feel bloated, you're going to feel full, and you're not necessarily going to have the appetite to be able to eat the food you need to, right? So either drink your water during your meal, or drink your water after your meal. Just avoid drinking water, I would say, anywhere from half an hour to 45 minutes before your meal, because you don't want to fill yourself up on water. You want to fill yourself up on food and then keep yourself hydrated in order to improve digestion of that food. So then you can in turn eat more food later if you need to, right? Or if you have another meal in a couple of hours, then it's going to be a lot easier to stomach, right? So that's the penultimate point, right? Number 5, don't drink lots before a meal, and just make sure you don't drink half an hour to 45 minutes before your meal, and that's what's worked for me well personally. So now moving on to the final point, and as I said, this point also links on to number 3. Don't snack at random times. As I said, we want to be eating at the same times every day. People think just incorporating random snacks throughout the day, because it is extra calories, it will help eat in a surplus. Yes, it will, right? But what is going to move the needle more? A 200 calorie protein bar at a random time throughout the day, or a 1000 calorie meal that's 2 hours later that may be ruined by this protein bar that you have? You've got to weigh it up, right? And if you do incorporate snacks, as I said, make sure they're at the same time every day, because then your body's going to start to recognize you have to snack at a certain time, therefore it can prime for it, increase the appetite. It's going to be a lot easier to stomach. Okay, so they are the 6 points. Thank you very much for watching. This is now the end of this video. If you enjoyed, make sure you hit the thumbs up on the channel, comment down below as well, and if you want to stay around for more videos, I upload every Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, and I'd absolutely love to help you. And as I said at the beginning of the video, if you want my personal help beyond these YouTube videos, then I have my very own free online community which helps currently 215 plus men just like you, skinny and wanting to bulk up and gain muscle. I've got training videos in there. I've got a free workout program in there. We can jump on a one-to-one call, and we're adding some very exciting things very, very soon. So if you don't want to miss out on that and you want my help, I would absolutely love to help you. It would genuinely mean a lot to me, and hopefully I can make a change to you and point you in the right direction. But without further ado, if you want to stay on the YouTube channel, that's no problem. So without further ado, I will see you in the next video.